Did you know Pokemon is the highest grossing media franchise of all time? That's crazy to think about when there are titans like Disney's Mickey Mouse and even Star Wars getting beat with multiple decades of a head start. The first Pokemon games were made available to Japanese gamers in 1996 and immediately became a huge hit. Since it was created, Pokemon has made about $100 billion through its merchandise, the video game series, the card game, and the anime. There are a lot of reasons why Pokemon became a cash cow, but part of the secret sauce is how well the anime and the games have complemented each other. In 2017, Sony's anime streaming service Crunchyroll did a survey and found that 90% of its users were also gamers, and a lot of franchises have made the jump from gaming to anime and vice versa to take advantage of this. So what made this strategy so lucrative for Pokemon specifically, and what connects anime and gaming on such a fundamental level? The story begins in Japan, a country that's had a huge impact on media. For the last 400 years, Japan has had one of the highest literacy rates in the world because of their strong emphasis on education. Such a long tradition of fostering people's potential allowed Japan to recover from its mistakes and overtake others several times throughout history. After the Second World War, with much of the country destroyed, foreign aid was used to rebuild infrastructure with the latest technologies. The educated population traveled the world and brought back and improved many inventions. The arrival of electricity and then computers allowed games to become bigger than ever before. Some of the first arcade games that used electricity were invented in the US, but progress slowed down fast. This left Japanese arcade distributors like Sega to pick up the slack, and with expert engineers and lots of external support, they created the submarine simulator Periscope. Periscope revived interest in arcade games and ushered in a new era where Japan was at the forefront of technological innovation. When arcade video games appeared in 1971, Japanese companies like Sega and Taito were more than ready to respond. The country slowly established itself as a titan in video games, and after the video game crash of 1983 in the US, Nintendo was able to swoop in and claim the entire industry. Nintendo's Famicom was actually so popular that about 1 in every 3 Japanese households own one, and the number for American households was not far behind. It was impossible not to know about Donkey Kong and Mario, and lots of parents all over the world still called the latest consoles the Nintendo. It's no wonder that a fun, highly addictive game like Pokemon became so popular when all the odds were in its favor. In the same country, a completely different movement was forming. Stories were told in many different forms, from shadow plays to scrolls with pictures. High literacy and a long history of painting on scrolls allowed many people to both create and enjoy manga. Manga is said to originate from Imakimono, or Imaki for short, dating back to the 12th and 13th centuries, while manga in its current form has been around since the 1800s, and its popularity has been steadily rising ever since then. Many manga artists wanted to use technology to make their stories more immersive. Some of the earliest examples of Japanese animation are from 1917, but the initial French and German film projectors were way too expensive. Anime wasn't properly defined until the 1950s, when an artist named Osamu Tezuka decided to adapt his manga into film and laid the style foundations for today's modern anime. Tezuka adored Disney animation, and his goal was to translate manga into animation that had a Disney-like soul, even with a low budget. Tezuka's first anime was Astro Boy in 1963, a series that was watched by over 40% of Japanese people that had access to a TV at the time. The anime was unique and extremely successful, and most future anime kept the stylistic quirks that originated here despite having higher budgets. Anime continued to grow as a genre while its competitors across the world stagnated. In the US, cartoons faded into children's media due to restrictions such as the Hays Code. The Hays Code is a set of rules and guidelines that Hollywood films were made to follow between the early 1930s and late 60s. Officially named the Motion Picture Production Code, it was a set of moral guidelines and rules that were meant to make Hollywood films presentable and safe for the public at large, which meant not covering or featuring certain controversial topics, themes, or actions. By the time the Hays Code was lifted, toy manufacturers had already hijacked most animation studios and started using them to pump out advertisements for kids. Saturday morning cartoons were the only animated films left. This gave anime the perfect opportunity to swoop in and fill a niche with teens and adults. The Pokemon anime came to the US as a Saturday morning cartoon, but quickly became an international sensation. Kids were raving about a new series that had cool looking creatures that were never around in their other cartoons. These same kids grew up and started immersing themselves in Japanese media, which became more accessible through piracy and eventually streaming services. Japanese companies didn't sleep on the opportunity either, because today as much as 60% of the world's animated shows are now anime, with most of them having subbed and dubbed options available. Japan was in the right place at the right time when it came to dominating both the anime and video game industries. Heavy promotion and funding made sure that the Japanese population was eager for more, and most people that owned a TV were excited to jump in. Companies were also paying attention to international events and took opportunities when the industries were showing weaknesses worldwide. With so much talent concentrated in one country, it was easy to take a risk on a unique synergy. Animation and game studios helped each other spread the word for the other's product, and bigger studios could easily dish out the money needed to develop the complementary media. For example, the Dragon Ball studio has made so much money from the anime that they've been able to finance multiple long-running video game series, including the the upcoming Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 4, and even Dragon Ball Z Kakarot was one of the best-selling games on release despite getting mid-reviews. Some companies like Sony even have their foot in both doors. Sony established the animation studio Aniplex in 1995, which is responsible for some of the most popular anime like Fullmetal Alchemist and Demon Slayer. Then they go publish games through the anime success like what we saw with Demon Slayer: The Hinokami Chronicles. On the other hand, Sony's PlayStation division has been one of the top players in gaming with critically acclaimed titles like The Last of Us and God of War. Sony often leverages Aniplex to produce the soundtrack for many of its PlayStation games, and this arrangement means they save a lot on production costs. But convenience is only part of the story. Sony is famous for audio equipment too, yet you don't see them cross-promoting anime or games with it nearly as much. An important aspect of cross-promoting is a marketing strategy called media mix, which Japanese companies have been using a ton since the 60s. The goal is to engage people who are mainly interested in one entertainment form, get them invested in the overall franchise, and make them crave content so that they jump to any other form just to get their fix. The Matrix was an early example of this. The Wachowskis made 3 good movies, but for people wanting to see the future of Zion, the next step was to join the Matrix Online, an MMORPG that regularly received updates that advanced the story. Since the Matrix Online was a subscription-based game, this was an effective way of turning fans of the movies into recurring customers. In return, they received new content that would fill in the gaps of their favorite world. And media mix doesn't always require that much investment. Crossovers are the most common type of media collaboration nowadays, and games like Fortnite, which feature them heavily, often don't even have a particular connection to the franchise that they're promoting. Attack on Titan characters were added in the previous season of the game, and the overall gameplay was changed with the addition of the ODM gear. When it comes to most Western media franchises though, new media is just supplementary to the main experience. For The Matrix and Star Wars, the movies are the main event, and the games or novels all exist to build the world around them. They enrich small details that would never get their time to shine otherwise, like showing a story on a side planet mentioned only once. Star Wars has a lot of decent side games that are engaging on their own despite being extensions to the movies like Jedi Survivor. Some even take the extreme route and make incredibly forgettable and low quality side content. This can cause a lot of reputation problems for a franchise and can even stop it from growing. An infamous example of this is the movie E.T. the Extraterrestrial, where there was an attempt to license the franchise for a tie-in video game, and the result was a game so bad that it arguably caused the 1983 video game crash. On the other hand, Japan's approach has traditionally been a little different. While franchises start from one game or anime series, Japanese companies try to spread content growth equally once the franchise starts taking off. In Pokemon's case, the anime started a year later, but the creators gave it as much attention as the games. As a result, many fans started out by just watching the anime, and the series still holds a special place in their hearts. Funny enough, another great example is Hello Kitty, which by the way is the second highest grossing media franchise at around $85 billion, which has its own manga and anime spin-offs, but most fans won't even know about any of them and will just enjoy a random piece of cute merchandise. Spreading a franchise out by dividing it into different media is appealing, but anime and gaming have a special kind of connection. The cross-promotion between live-action movies and video games is probably the closest thing Western media has to the relationship between anime and games. Both forms of media combine many different types of art, from pictures and motions to music and story writing. Combinations like this open up a lot of possibilities, from forging an iconic brand identity to allowing content to be enjoyed by parts of the audience that can't enjoy art in a single form because they're blind, deaf, or any other reason. Games these days are often described as interactive movies, and people who manage to keep up with the hectic development process of a game can usually carry over their expertise when working on films too. This allows for very close cooperation when adapting a movie to a game, something that isn't quite as simple as just translating a movie into a book. All of this makes films and games a natural pairing. Popular franchises like Star Wars, The Matrix, and Alien focus most of their efforts on expanding into video games, although they've all expanded from their original form into other areas too. Anime makes a better pairing for games than other types of film though, and this isn't purely because of Japanese companies having good business sense. There's also a technical factor. Anime and games both rely on 2D and 3D animation, meaning visuals that appear in one can usually be reproduced somewhat accurately in the other. With improvements in graphics, games have even taken visual inspiration from anime. This ranges from games like Persona 5 that are done entirely in a style resembling anime to games like Valorant that have several skins inspired by anime. In both cases, gamers love being reminded of the medium, even if it's not a collaboration with a specific franchise. Live action movies record the real world, and we weren't close to making computer generated graphics that look photorealistic for the longest time. Most movies relied on practical effects instead, which also limited their scope when it came to depicting something truly crazy. There's a big gap between the strengths of games and live action movies because of this. Movies have always been better at showing situations that are grounded and emotional because they include the details that only a live action recording could properly depict. Games, on the other hand, can show things that are completely impossible in real life while still making them fit within the game's world. This makes them the perfect pairing for games where the series can define the world while the game can let fans live through it. The number of crossovers is getting bigger every day, and and yet there's still a lot of ground to cover. One thing is for sure though, and it's that anime and games will stay a popular duo for a long time to come.